Hello, Shankaran sir. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, sir. George here. Shall we start?
Yeah, yes. So shall I go on the
Sir,
video? Okay.
no, we shall go with the
Ah,
official starting ceremony and then we'll let you.
yes, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, start.
Respected resource person for the today's session, Dr. Shankaran sir, and all my dear participants. Good morning to you all. I, Georgios, Assistant Professor, on behalf of the Department of Commerce and Yukshetra Management, is very much happy and privileged in the conduct of this 7-day international seminar. To start the session formally, now I invite Ms. Anju, Assistant Professor of Commerce, for the welcome address.
Good morning, everyone. It is an instant of incredible privilege and honor for me to welcome you all to the second day of our 7-day international webinar on emerging trends in commerce conducted by the Department of Commerce, Yukshetra Institute of Management Studies. First of all, I would like to welcome our today's resource person, Dr. Shankaran, Director, Justice KSH Institute of Management. Sir, we all are privileged to have you as our resource person. I wholeheartedly welcome you to the second day of our 7-day international webinar. Welcome, sir. Next, I
Thank
would
you.
like to welcome our director, Reverend Dr. Matthew George Varel, Principal Dr. Tommy Anthony, Vice Principal Reverend Dr. Lalu Ilikel, and HOD of our Commerce Department, Dr. Matilda Danny, to this webinar. Next, I would like to welcome our dear participants and all other faculties to this webinar. Participants, utilize this opportunity to the maximum. Once again, I welcome you all to this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anju. Now I godly invite Reverend Father Shaiju Pariyat, Assistant Director and a young man in spirit, for the official message of today's webinar.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy that the PG Department of Commerce, Yukshetra College, is conducting a webinar. As we all know, the students are locked up at their homes due to COVID-19. Webinars such as these will keep them on the track of learning. The topic of today's webinar is Teaching and Learning in the New Era, Applications for Commerce and Management Studies. And the resource person for today's webinar is Dr. Shankaran, who is an expert and learned person on this field. I wish the resource person all the best, and to the PG Department of Commerce, and to the coordinators, and to all the participants. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Father Shaiju Pariyat. According to John Holt, learning is not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of learners. Now we have the official session by our resource person, Dr. Shankaran sir, from the Justice K.S. Hegde Institute of Management. Sir, I welcome you for the official session.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir.
Okay, I'm able to be heard. You able to hear me well?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, good morning, everybody at Yukshetra. Thank you very much for having me over here. My thanks to all the people who had spoken to me, Professor Kirti, Professor George Jose, Professor Anju, of course, dear Father Shaiju, just saw him over here right now. Indeed, it's my privilege and pleasure to be your resource person today. The time is 9:35, and I think you've been keeping excellent time. You said 5 minutes and for the initial introduction and so on. Really happy to follow this time, and I would rather talk for about whatever time, maybe about half an hour. I'll try to make it as short as possible, so there is enough time for questions and deliberations and so on. In case I'm if I'm not audible, please give me a call on my mobile. That is Professor George Jose. And I hope the video is also coming all right. The systems are working well, I suppose. Now, this seminar, I'm going to have a presentation. So let me put on the presentation, which is, let me just check this out.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, you're able to see the thing, right? Okay. And now the topic is teaching and learning in the new era, applications for management and commerce studies. This is something which, this topic was chosen by me, and I thought it is relevant to the topic for your seminar. And I just saw that the people on the panel, many of them are practitioners, and practitioners have been asking for different kinds of skills from the students when they graduate from the academy. So I thought, let me try and see what is it that we can do. We do know by and large now what is it that they are looking for, and in general, people are looking for people with not just knowledge as we understood until very recently, but with certain other skills. So I thought we should really be talking about what is it that we can do as faculty as well as students. So I thought I'll talk about teaching and learning. These two go together, and I think there should be one word which means both these things happen together, and they're not really separate. So soon we might come to some kind of a compound word which would mean both these things happen together, not only for students but also for the faculty. So I, for instance, have been greatly benefited by students. I've been in academia for now about 20 years. Before that, I used to be in the corporate world and so on. I was on my own for some time. So I realized that teaching becomes enjoyable. Teaching and research and writing becomes enjoyable when we have students on our side and we do some co-development or co-thinking and so on. So teaching and learning are two sides of the same coin. And I, for instance, learned blogging from students. I use open source Ubuntu, Linux, though I'm not a IT person. I use Ubuntu, and I'm very happy with whatever systems that I use, because so students have taught me all these things. So I really mean what I'm trying to say, and I change my way of teaching and my slides based on the feedback that are given by students, and have been enormously benefited by being in academia in terms of after I took up the profession of teaching. Now,
Sir.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, your slides are not visible actually.
Oh, my slides are not visible. Was
Yeah.
it visible earlier?
No, sir.
Okay, so let me see what's happening. Okay, pressing now. Yeah, is that better now? Are you able to see? Hello?
Hello, sir. No,
Yeah. No, not yet.
not yet, sir.
Okay, not yet. So I'm saying present. Okay, share your screen. Yeah. Okay, I think now you should get it. Okay, just tell me when you get it. No, not yet.
Not, sir. Shall we go for the?
Eight minute. Let me. Yeah,
Okay.
8 minute. I'll just try your entire screen. Chrome tab. Okay, let me try this Chrome tab here.
Sir, you should go for a window or entire screen.
Yeah, entire screen. Yeah, your entire screen. Now, I think now it's going to come.
Yes, yes, sir. It's coming. It's coming.
Okay, good.
Thank you, sir.
So you can see the screen now, right?
Yeah. Yes, yes. We can see the
Okay.
PPTs. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, PPTs. Now I'll just make it full. Start from the first slide. For some reason, that is not coming. Let's see. Yeah, now it's okay. You're
Yes.
able to see it.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Full
sir.
screen, right? Okay,
Perfect.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so perfect. Very nice. So before I start, I want to say, when I got your call from Mundur, I was really happy to be associated with your institution because long ago, as long as 45 to 50 years ago, um, we used to go, my siblings and we used to go to a place very close to your institute, just across the road to a place called Pudanur. So we had some ancestral house there, and we used to have the best of times in life over there during summer when we used to have mangoes and jackfruit and all those things. And I was very, very happy to note that your location is really like almost like a stone's throw, perhaps about a kilometer or so from this place. So I was kind of excited to know that there is this institution. I wasn't aware of this institution because I've never been into that part of the state for a long time. And so I'm really, really happy to welcome all the students, all the faculty, and maybe one day I'll have an opportunity to come and see your place when, after this COVID thing is over. Okay, now coming back to this presentation, I'm going to talk essentially about 4 things, and it's a very short presentation. I have got just 10 slides, and I will pretty much rush through it so that we can finish it in about 20 minutes or so, or half an hour or whatever, so that we have enough time for Q&A. So I'm going to initially talk about context, and then I will present to you 6 facets of teaching learning process, which I would say is really what we should be preparing our students for when they are ready to go out into the world of profession, whatever profession they choose to do. Then I will take an example from business and commerce, just one particular example, and show how the same issue can be viewed from these 6 facets of teaching, and how is it that we should be preparing for our students. And I will also be critical in saying that for the most part we are emphasizing the first one, and maybe 80 to 90% of our emphasis on the first one, and hence it is found that when people graduate from the academy, wherever in this country particularly, and this happens even in countries like United States, what happens is the industry feels that, okay, they're not quite ready. Now, this should be taken with the understanding that as educators, we have to be self-critical. We are not saying that everything that the industry is saying or doing is okay. We have to be also critical from our perspective. That's why actually you have research in terms of saying that these are the kind of these things that should happen in society, and business as an important role as an organ of society, particularly, well, irrespective of the political ideologies, whether it is capitalism or whether it's socialism or whatever. So there is a role for commerce and management, and economic sustainability is really about, or rather profit is really about economic sustainability. So I'm going to talk about these facets of teaching learning, not just from the perspective of what we are doing or what we should be doing, but in the context of what society needs us to do as teachers and as students, so that we are able to contribute as well as be happy and achieve whatever we have set our goals on. And our goals should be sufficiently high enough so that we are able to contribute to others and find that there is meaning in life, and there is a positive sum game that one builds with the society around us or the organization that one is going to be joining. So that is the kind of sense I'm going to bring in over here. And as we progress, I'd like to also be asked questions on how we can do these things, or what are the things that is stopping us from doing these things. So we'll get into those 6 facets of teaching with the example of business and commerce. And then we'll talk about teaching and learning the future in the context of the changes that we would be discussing in the context. That is the first, next slide. So the context, we are at the cusp of a change in disciplinary definitions and teaching learning processes. Now, this is very evident. COVID is a very good example how the very fact that I'm talking to you over here today this way is perhaps because of what has happened in the last 3 months. And this is going to stay actually, and a lot of meetings are going to happen even after things get normalized. It's going to be through technological means. Now, technology, so it's technology. Everybody knows about this. Now, content versus process. Now, this is a very, very important thing. And this is, it goes to the depth of, the way we do things. Content as in what we're doing today and what we should be doing later. What is it that we want to achieve is content, actually. So content is substantive matter. Process is basically the way things are done. So basically, we could say that this is about kind of ends and means, or state and process. Content as a state. Currently, this is the state. This is the state into which we would like to be in next 2 years. So those things are really about, a kind of a cross-sectional view of reality is content. While process is, what is it that we need to do? It's more action orientation. Action for human beings, action also involves, thinking and deciding. So a lot of it means, the preparation for actual activities done with hands and feet. If you were to say, we have the head and the heart deciding what should be done with the hands and feet. So so what we mean by process is the means to achieve something that we have set ourselves to do. So now what we then I'm going to talk about in the context. Next thing is how to learn versus what to learn versus how to learn. So content is what to learn. So we need to have understanding of let's say equations. We need to understand how to, for instance, for commerce students, we should know how to balance let's say accounts, how to do net present value, how to do project evaluation, how to make sure that the ethical aspects of business or the profession are followed. So what is it that we need to do is what it is. So what to learn? Those things we need to learn. For instance, definitions we should know. We should be able to balance the accounts. We should be able to formulate or figure out how the balance sheet would look, or profit and loss account and so on. How to learn is, are you going to learn through a passive process of hearing the professor? And are you going to learn through experimentation? Are you going to learn by having a hypothesis in mind and then checking it out with your professor? Or are you going to go as a clean slate, and are you going to just absorb whatever the person is going to say? Are you going to have the previous class material in the mind so that you know how to ask questions? So even if the professor, if the teacher is going to be saying something which is different from the previous class, is the student able to really catch those things and have a intelligent conversation? So is the class a arena for a conversation, or is it an arena for simply taking some material from the brain, the head of the professor, and passing it on to the student. So that is what we mean by how you learn. So how you learn is a very, very important thing, because ultimately when things change so quickly as we see today, today you have Python, tomorrow you have Java, or today you have Java, tomorrow you have Python, day after tomorrow you have something else, or you have different ways of communicating. Today you have something in written, tomorrow you have something on your laptop, day after tomorrow you have something on virtual world. And the back of this is, how are you going to learn these new things so that you're able to actually be with the times. But fundamentally, are you being honest? Are you being truthful? Are you able to convey your deepest inclinations about something properly? Are you able to recognize the kind of companies you would like to work for, the kind of bosses you would like to have? All this is mediated finally by the way you approach the thing, because the same situation can be looked at so many different ways. One person simply looks at it as a passive thing, another person looks as an active dynamic thing from which one should learn. So this how you learn is very, very important. So fundamentally I'm saying content is what you learn and process is how you learn. Yeah. So what to learn versus how to think. So the moment you talk about what to learn versus how you learn, you're essentially talking about what to learn versus how to think. Okay, so when things are changing so quickly, all that we have is the ability to think through the issue clearly, for which we have to prepare ourselves, our students, in the future generation, the next generation. We need to prepare them for meeting those contingencies, those situations. They need to look at the situation and make best use of that situation and so on. So this is what is the context. Now I'm going to just quickly now jump to the 6 facets of teaching learning. Now this is very, very interesting, and I came across uh, I'll show you the book from where I have taken this. I'll show you the title. But I have done quite a bit of research in this area in terms of looking at how these things happen. So I looked at strategic thinking, systems thinking, design thinking, and in management, a lot of these things do come. And as a student of strategy, in fact, I did quite a bit of work in this area of cybernetics and so on. I'm basically an engineer. So I kind of wanted to find out, how is it that, how do human beings think and what are the different ways of thinking? So at one point, I was really fascinated by systems thinking, and there's a whole lot of literature on systems thinking. Some of you, I'm sure, would be familiar with it. Peter Senge and, that tradition of systems thinking and feedback loops and delays and so on and so forth. So so all this is, and then you have learning organizations. It's not coincidental that organizations are said to be learning themselves as a collective, though initially the idea of learning organization was not accepted really, because how can organizations learn? But then they realized that, okay, as collective, there is always the ability to learn. Groups are able to learn because it becomes the currency for common language. You don't have to explain complex issues with using a lot of words, because everybody understands this. So that's what we mean by learning organization. So after having looked at various things, and also looking at the kind of inclination that our students have in India in terms of being probably a little bit more jugaad oriented, a little bit more self-knowledge oriented, hopefully at least. I thought this is a very interesting classification as to what really teaching learning process is all about. So it consists of these 6 things: explanation, interpretation, application, perspective, empathy, and self-knowledge. So as you can see, as you go down the list, as you go from 1 to 6, it becomes more and more complex, more and more, in some ways, problematic in terms of teaching. But then we have to create the kind of certain kind of ecology in the classroom, which can be done. I'll briefly talk about that also. Okay, it's 55, so I've already taken 20 minutes, so I don't think I should um, take. I need to go really quickly on this. So, yeah, so this is the book from which I have taken this. This is Understanding by Design by Wiggins and McTighe. Very interesting book. These are basically educators who have researched on how higher education really should happen. And this is discipline free in the sense any discipline can take this as applicable, especially at postgraduate. I mean, well, actually at the graduate level. So not so much at the school level and so on. Okay, so let's look at each one of them. I'll take two of them at the same time to reduce the number of slides in the space. Explanation is why generalizations of principles. So when we talk about, we define a company as this, we make a difference between a company or a partnership or a proprietorship. This is the difference. We are actually giving explanations, providing justified and systematic accounts of phenomena, facts, and data, make insightful connections, and provide illuminating examples or illustrations. So when we give examples also, we are essentially trying to explain and make things less fuzzy. So when you say, well, food is macro concept, or it's a superset, as you say in mathematics, and a subset of it would be, let's say, cooked rice, curry, or chicken, or whatever. Okay, so we are essentially having a hierarchical structure wherein we have a superset and subsets. It's basically an explanation. Okay, this is what we do for the most part in almost all textbooks. For the most part, would be doing explanation. What is interpretation? Interpretation is tell meaningful stories. So this is now people talk about stories a lot because interpretation comes in. So the word meaning, it doesn't. I'm addressing the students here. The meaning here, it's not the dictionary meaning we are talking about. The meaning that we are talking about over here, does it make meaning to me as an individual? Does it touch my heart, so to say? So one good example is about a bricklayer, a person who is laying the bricks. So a person goes and asks him, "What are you doing?" Say, "Okay, I'm laying bricks." Another person who is doing exactly the same job would say, "I'm making a wall." You must have heard the story before. And finally, the last person says, "Well, I'm making a shrine." All right, which means the bhava, the what inner state of mind is what gives meaning to the things that we do. So when we are driving, for instance, are we going to look at this driving as just getting from one place to the other, or are we going to really say that here I am going for a higher purpose? A doctor is going to the hospital. Here I am moving to actually take care of my patients who are waiting there for me, and I'm doing something meaningful for them. As a teacher, I'm saying that, well, when I walk into my academy, am I walking into a temple? Am I walking into a place where knowledge is paramount? Or do I see it as just another factory where machines are producing components, or machines are producing some commodity? So that bhava, this inner sense of what we're doing, that is really meaning. So part of that repertoire, if I may say, of things that we have are, you know, revealing historical or personal dimension to ideas, events. The moment we talk about history, not as cold facts, but as the way things happened, we'll get a sense of the movement of reality. From this, it turned out to be like this. Okay. Make the object of understanding personal or accessible through images, anecdotes, analogies, and models. Now, this is not actually, interpretation is not a scientific process. Interpretation is a poetic process, while explanation is actually a scientific process. So science combines with humanities, or let's say equations, mathematical equations combined with poetry, the moment we talk about explanation and interpretation. As commerce students, I will later show you how we can actually touch these chords, because these are very, very important. These will make a good accountant. The difference between a good accountant and a great accountant is probably, this. He's able to bring in these kind of things. You know what is the purpose for which these rules are made, and you know how to interpret the rules very, very, ethically, and we are able to convey it to our clients, for instance, all right, or practice certain things in the organization. Uh, I'm audible, everybody, Professor George? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Um,
Yes, sir.
all right. Do you want me to go faster, slower? All that is okay?
It's okay, sir. You can take your
Yeah.
time, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Um, I'm trying to get to my slide now. One second. Yeah. Um, so we are on which slide now? A minute, huh? Yeah.
We were on can interpret and can explain
Yeah.
slide.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not able to get the screen on my. Yeah, because I went back to the other one. Just give me a minute now. How do I?
Sure, sure, sir. Sure.
Okay. I think I will just stop sharing and then go back to it again. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No problem.
Yeah. I think I will not come out of it. Once in a while, you can tell me, okay, so that, then I'm able to.
Okay, sir.
You're able to see the screen now?
No, sir. No.
No. Okay. I'll just get on to it once again. Sorry for this interruption.
No problem, sir. No. No
Yeah.
problem.
So we all will take a bit of time before we figure out these things, I guess. Okay. Anyway, so that is interpretation. I'll just keep talking. Third one is really about application, right? So application is about how are we going to apply. And in the academy, we'll not get 100% opportunity to apply these things in real life because we are not there yet, right? So what really happens is we should be a bit patient, and we should be really looking at okay, I think I'll go back to another one. Um, okay. So are you able to see this slide now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's coming.
Okay, good. Yeah. So over here, application, we are talking about, the ability to apply. So can apply. Okay, earlier we said can explain, can interpret. So when we say this can interpret or can apply, we are saying the student at the end of the at the end of the class or at the end of the course or the end of the program are able to do these things. That's why I'm using the verb can. Okay, so can apply, effectively use and adapt what we know in diverse and real contexts. We can do, within inverted commas, the subject. So what this really means is, one of the ways for academics to consider whether the students are able to achieve us, or we ourselves are able to achieve in the first place, is can we actually be in the role of an advisor or in the role of a consultant and actually advise the client that yes, you can do these things, and our job doesn't end by just conveying whatever theory there is, but we are able to convince the person and say that, well, given resources and given time is also a resource, I can actually implement this. Okay, we should be able to say that as academicians, and our students should also be able to do that. So what you can do for this is you can actually send out our students to the field and get them to do different kinds of studies, at the end of which they say, we gave a meaningful report to the client, and the client will be able to implement these, or hypothetically, honestly, authentically, I will be able to implement this if I have the time and resources. I will employ these kind of people, I will do this, I will travel this way, I will get the right software. This is how I'm going to track expenditure, this is how I'm going to control expenditure, this is how I'm going to do a bank reconciliation account. I'll go to the bank, I can talk to them, I can achieve all these things. That is application. All right. So what I'm saying is application ultimately cannot be 100% done in the academy, but then you can be very, very close to achieving whatever you have set out to do. The light has gone over here. So yeah, well, actually it's come back again. Um, all right. So Professor George, okay, you're able to hear, right?
Yes, sir, we are able to hear you.
Yeah. Next is perspective. Okay, this is the fourth one. After explanation and interpretation, we talked about application. Here we are having. So perspective is a very interesting idea because there is no one answer. This is divergent answers. Okay. So a person who comes from, let's say, one perspective, he comes from a capitalism perspective. Okay, capitalism, money capitalism, let's call it. He'll say that the most important resource is money. Another person who comes from, let's say, socialism might say labor is the most important resource. Now, as educated people, we should be able to understand that both these perspectives, both these different points of view have their own worth and their own value, and we should be able to negotiate as individuals what is really the point that you would like to have in mind. So an educated mind will be able to reconcile between these two, even if you are not able to entirely convince somebody else. You will be able to reconcile and say, in a given situation, this is how I will give importance to money capital. This is the way I will give importance to labor capital. This is the way I will give importance to um, intellectual capital. And what are the contexts under which this will be more important to me? So it's like a pendulum that's swinging from left to right, and you want to say that if it's going too far on one side, I'll bring it back here. So it's a very dynamic kind of a thing wherein you are able to see it from different perspectives, not simply talk about it and hold a flag and go for a street level shouting. It's not a shouting thing. It's more about deeper understanding. So perspective is kind of being able to hold on to these different points of view and yet be able to be acting without paralysis. So you say at the end of the day, okay, guys, let us discuss this, but at the end of the day, we need to make a decision. We'll go with this decision, and you need to do this, okay? And this, I was on my own for about 4 years, and I was in consulting and so on. So over there, it's very, very important to have everything in time. So everything is like urgent. While I think education actually, it's least urgency oriented, but I believe it is the most important oriented because we are really talking about the future. For that, we should really be having a very, very high level of perspective so that, at the end of the day, students are able to actually develop their own perspective and not have one perspective and try and force it on students and, kind of a thing. So students also should be willing to understand that when true teaching is about giving you these different perspectives and then for you to choose. Of course, you can always ask, under these circumstances, Professor, how will you act? There you will have a point of view, but it's not to be spoon-fed. So perspective is about, this gray areas. And at the highest level, the perspective is about, self versus the other. There's a great a Jewish author, a seer. He talks about I and thou. He doesn't even say you, I and thou. So do I see I and thou, you and I together as one? I mean, typically, like that's the kind of effort that of all great teachers have been actually reconciling between ultimate opposite, you versus I. These things students begin to understand on only after a certain age for the most people, for most people. But then they understand when the professor is authentic and talks about these things, and they kind of listen to you then. Similarly, truth and beauty. Chandrasekhar, who is one of the great physicists who won the Nobel Prize, he wrote an entire book on beauty and truth, not verses, beauty and truth. So for him, as a scientist, you will expect him to pursue truth, but he's saying that, well, whenever I pursued beauty, I could get to truth. So he's reconciling between truth and beauty. Um, so that is perspective. Next one is, so I'll give you an example later. I'll just take one issue and give you examples in each one of them. Okay. Next one is empathy and self-knowledge, right? Can empathize. Now, what is happening today is, the earlier idea about individual excellence is all gone because it's so hugely transdisciplinary. If you want to get anything done, we need to ask people for help, intellectual help, because you can't be the custodian for so much of knowledge that exists out there. So the trend is towards also co-opting students into this process, including school students in some cases. So, how they learn is so important. We'll never fully understand how children learn. As a parent, many of you are parents here. We understand, we understand that we know so little about how children learn, for instance. So, teaching in school itself is so hugely, in fact, it's more challenging than higher education, what you and I are doing. So can empathize. Are we able to understand how people learn? So find value in what others might find odd, alien, or impossible. Perceive sensitively on the basis of prior direct experience. Actually, I'm quoting this also from the book that I earlier talked about, which is this, okay? Understanding by Design by Tiggins, and the other gentleman's name was here, okay? McTiggay. All right. So that is empathy. Find value in what others might find odd. So for this to be really, truly, truly empathetic, we need to know where they come from. What I'm saying is not geographically so much, culturally, geographically, everything. And you'll find the same hand sign in one society might mean something else. So things like that, So are we able to empathize with the other person from where that person is coming and so on? Last one is self-knowledge. Have self-knowledge. Yeah. Show metacognitive awareness. Metacognitive awareness is things like, how do I learn? Oh, this is something that I didn't think about. I always think very linearly. I always think in terms of what is the cause. But why do you need to find a cause, for instance? Okay, the person is happy. You don't have to find a reason. So metacognitive awareness essentially means we know something about the way we are thinking and where it comes from. Perceive the personal style, prejudices, our own prejudices, okay, projection. People who are angry at others are actually angry with themselves. I mean, that's what, Freud talks about projection. Habits of the mind. Habits of the mind. We tend to look at same thing, okay, very, very with colored eyes, okay. So there was this famous psychologist who says man is a belief-seeking mechanism rather than a fact-seeking mechanism. We think we are all fact-seeking, but we are not fact-seeking mechanism. We are belief-seeking mechanism. So when we understand ourselves, we understand that we are full of prejudices, and we'll have to be kind to ourselves. Otherwise, it'll be dangerous, because then there's no room for self-loathing here. And we also understand other people. They also come from their prejudices. So actually, what we need to do is we need to actually create an environment in the academy where these, prejudices and defensivenesses are least, and we are able to get on with the task on hand. That's why purpose is very important, and that's a that's a topic for discussion another occasion. Actually, so purpose is very important. Unfortunately, in our education system, there is no place for that kind of purpose-driven thing, because we are told what to do generally by the system. System tells you do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. So all that is going to change. That is what new education policy is about. And I've been having a lot of, kind of uh, a lot of interactions with people on this issue, and we've been able to make quite a good amount of progress. And I think as a country, NEP is really, really something that we can look forward to. Some states have not taken to it very kindly for political reasons or whatever, but essentially it's about giving the freedom to the faculty and students to think for themselves. That's what this particular document enshrines. I hope all political uh, environment that we have in different states or the country allows us to do these things and gets knowledge back to where it really belongs, and not use power or money to supersede, just sheer logical and humanistic values that the academy enshrine. Yeah, so that is self-knowledge. So some of this may be a bit, might go a little bit high for students, but doesn't matter. Actually, true Indian thinking is, let's put the seeds of change, because we don't know when it will happen. A lot of my students come back after 10 years. So what you said that day made sense to me. And it's never the same thing that they say. They say things which, so many different things. Recently, somebody came and told me, so you talked about Carlos Castaneda. He's a Southern, Native American shaman. And I never realized I was talking. He said, I read books of him and I was very impressed by him. Another person called me from Saudi Arabia and said, I'm going to MIT, and I'm going for a lecture for a series of classes on learning organization. And you had taken an elective in learning organizations. So I have many such incidents. So I completely understand and believe that what's important is some kind of a commitment to learn, and not so much learn everything on day one by students. So it's pretty okay for us to introduce difficult concept like, let's say, dharma. For a small child, the idea of dharma is to take the milk that the mother gives. Okay, or don't mess up this place, for instance. Okay, or have your breakfast in time. Or that goes on to higher level. So we should be flexible and plastic in understanding things at a higher level. Otherwise, we'll be stuck up. So that is self-knowledge. How do I learn? What is am I more, mind-oriented or emotional-oriented, or nothing wrong, or hands and feet-oriented? Do I have to do something when I learn? All this is useful in our learning journey. So that is self-knowledge. So let me just come to very quickly an example. Okay. Now this, I hope you find this interesting more than what is being. So let's talk about teaching learning of firm diversification or mergers and acquisitions as commerce students. Okay. Now this is something which I took as an example, and all this are examples of mine. So if you have any questions, you can ask it. I'll be happy to clarify and learn in the process. So explanation is talking about firm diversification. You can explain what different forms of diversifications are, why they happen, and what circumstances, so on. So vertical diversification, horizontal diversification, conglomerate diversification, definitions, all this is part of explanation. I'm not going to get into it. We understand this very, very deeply. And my point is, we get stuck up there as teachers in our country, particularly because we inherited a certain form of learning and we didn't move from there. Hopefully things should change today. Interpretation is making meaning. All right. What does diversity mean to the top management? Right. For one management, it might mean wasting money, shareholders' money, on very highly priced firms. For another one, it means there's a very quick way to learn, to grow, rather than go for greenfield projects. Okay. So what does diversification mean to the top management? How does diversification create a sense of quick growth and indeed become a management mantra? Okay. So there are companies which go on expanding because they take over companies. For instance, that was the state of General Electric at one point. Yeah. In India, you will find this private equities doing this today. Okay. Now, some people might say private equity is too capitalistic and they're just throwing somebody else's money, and being so hard-nosed, they come and break the company. Now, all this is part of the interpretation. Two persons could disagree, and in that disagreement, we learn from it. But we don't get paralyzed, but we take a position and either join this company or that company, or if it's your own company, You either go for greenfield expansion or mergers and acquisition with eyes open. Okay, how does mergers and acquisition become the battleground for industry players to fight it out? See, these are loaded words. Okay, like they have the kind of a tone of a story, battleground for industry. I purposely put these words. What is the passion behind those who operate the market for corporate control? Okay, um, corporate control is basically so in capitalist societies you have a market for corporate control. So hostile take over and all these things to take place. Okay. So interpretation is basically at this level of the, does it make meaning to you? So if you are in a company which is which is into this kind of mergers and acquisition in a big way, but you believe that it is just all wastage of money and shareholders are getting shareholders or even employees are getting hammered because of this, you'll be unhappy. So you don't want to be in such a company. Okay, so because it's not just survival, so you have to have meaning in what we do. Okay, so that is the interpretation level. Application is, how does one do a due diligence before a merger and acquisition? How do I? So I have to look at the balance sheet. I have to look at the profit and loss account. I have to see what is the state of the machines, what is the written down value of equipment, what is land price, are there any litigations? All that is part of due diligence. I used to do this kind of work in consulting. What are the points to be covered? Okay, so you'll have a checklist of things typically. Okay, you have to cover that. And what format would you use to develop value of an M&A? Is it going to be, its earning potential for future? Is it about the current market price, the market capitalization that you use? Why would you use these different valuation techniques under what circumstances? Or do you use all of them and kind of project what can be done in future? Typically, that's what I would say you should do. You say what kind of investment is required and come with a plan as this can be done and see the net present value of your investment. Can you price an M&A? That is, can you say what should be the price and how should it be structured? Okay, what should be the swap value and so on and so forth. That is application. Okay, now everything of this can be touched upon and appreciated in the academy. Actually, we may not be able to do entirely, but we will have some kind of an understanding of these things are required. These are all important when we are talking about mergers and acquisition. Perspective is organic or inorganic ways of growth better. When I say greenfield project, is basically inorganic. It is organic. While when you take over companies, it's basically inorganic. So natural growth versus takeover growth, or growth through takeover. What are your views? Perspective. Okay, are the regulations required for beneficial M&As and avoidance of unhealthy M&As available in the country? Okay, this kind of a question will be asked by those people who are at the policy level. Okay, or if you are a researcher in the area of interface between government and a firm level issues. Okay, that is perspective. Empathy is, does hostile takeover lead to unhealthy job losses? Yeah, you're being empathetic to one very important stakeholder called employees. Is such trade-offs inevitable? Are such trade-offs inevitable? If companies are creative enough, is it possible to avoid job losses through change orientation so that there are no threats of hostile takeovers? Very often, inaction is really leading to difficult situations for people in future. So if you're truly empathetic, you'll be more change oriented, according to me, because the world is too closely connected. So it's very important to be, doing the right things, including change management, so that we are being fair to everybody. Otherwise, there will be job losses and so on. Do M&As create unhealthy competitive dynamics in companies? Okay, empathy, self-knowledge. Okay, what kind of personalities are required for working in the field? Not all personalities fit into this, and this you realize when you have worked for a few years in different fields, and you realize certain personalities are appropriate for marketing, certain types are appropriate for finance and so on. Who are the M&A gurus? Is the M&A field right for me as a career choice? So what I'm trying to say is we need to touch these things at the number 2 to 6 issues when we are talking about any idea. If you talk about a separate entity concept in the classroom, I think you don't have to force fit these things into this, but you can. When you talk about segmentation, you can actually deal with all these six if you are imaginative enough. So, but textbooks are not written in this manner because they're not looking at this kind of learning theory or learning depth of learning. Okay. The last is teaching, learning the future. So both students as well as faculty, blended teaching and learning. We know what's happening right now. This is a good example. Distinction between content knowledge and other forms of knowledge. Because I think most of content knowledge can be tested through multiple choice questions, but other forms of knowledge, people have to express it more through stories, and it can be written material, it could be through movies, it could be through video, audio, it could be anything. I'm not saying everybody should write or anything. I think there are people who express so well through music, through in the case of commerce, well, I think it probably will be, since it's more profession, like accountancy is more a profession, it can't be art forms and so on. But we have to make a distinction between this, because the other forms of knowledge cannot be learned or tested, and assessments, for instance, cannot be done through multiple choice questions. But content knowledge is. So I think I'm a proponent for having multiple choice questions and learning through some other professors, some other universities. But at the end of the day, if you really want to learn the process, it has to be more one-to-one, so to say. And even large classes is possible to do, provided the faculty is freed from having to sit and do this correction and so on and so forth that's happening today. Anyway, that's another I've deeply thought through this. In fact, I've researched in these areas and made some changes and made some impact on other academics too. Rethink knowledge as not etched in stone. This is a very, very big problem, because we think this is what it is. Some people say, this is what it is. Then I ask them, which book is telling you that? I'll show you another book which says this is not that. For instance, they'll say HR is about managing human resources. I say there are books that says resources itself is a word that is not exactly acceptable to people. So what are you talking about? HR. Okay. Co-thinking and co-development of faculty students. Earlier I talked about how students can help us develop material. You have to be deeply, deeply, honest about these things, and students also should be really serious about, and be professional, so that they should cast themselves as, co-thinkers along with faculty. And this is what great people do. I can give you so many stories, but we don't have time now. One very quick story. I think it was the same Chandrasekhar I mentioned, the Nobel Prize winner. He was in Pennsylvania State University. So there was always rivalry there. So one of his courses, advanced physics, there were only two people who enrolled for it. And it was enrolled in some, in a campus where he had to drive some 50 miles or something, so he had to spend about easily an hour and a half just commuting. So he said, this is exactly the class what I want to take, because these guys have taken such a difficult topic as an elective, and I want to teach them. Then both those guys actually went on to win Nobel Prizes. I think one of them was Chandrasekhar or something like that, but this happened in a place called Harrisburg in Pennsylvania. I was very close to that place once, in Ohio, when I was doing my doctoral studies. So it's a very inspiring story, because then he keeps saying, all my students, 100% of students in this course went on to get a Nobel Prize, because both these two guys got Nobel Prize. So what I'm trying to say is co-think and co-development is very important, especially as master's level. And we don't understand, I'm sorry to say this, but in our country, we don't understand, PhD means, kind of taking students to that level where you become great co-thinkers, and still the professional aspects are taken care of. Governance versus regulations. Okay, governance is basically about setting the, giving the principles, and the rules have to be formed by the governed rather than the governing. While regulations are do this, spoon feeding. This is what's been happening until now. Evaluation to assessment. Assessment is something where students get to do things again and again, and only after they pass that they will be graduating. It's not about sudden kill, pass or fail. No, you take to that level, and then only you actually graduate. So uh, choice-based credit system, all that thing is there. So systems have to be in place also. Absolute to relative grading, I can go on for a long time about this. We'll talk about it some other time. So relative grading is about, actually nudging students to do better and better and better. Not feeling great. Oh, I cracked CAT exam or JEE. That's absolute. That's not what we're talking about. Output versus outcome, very, very fundamental. And I think very few people really understand this difference, though they talk about outcome-based education. And we can have a session on this. We can have a 2-day session on really what is outcome, because you need to have different rubrics to know what where we are in terms of outcomes. Not for students, it's for us to decide how our students are doing. So it's self-evaluation for faculty. That's outcomes actually. Applications or rubrics for honest introspection. I think 8 and 9 are related. I think that's it, and I will close here. I think it's almost like 56 minutes I took. I was told I can go a little further, so please go ahead and ask questions. I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I'll be happy. I've shared these slides with Professor George, and you're most welcome to take it. Professor George, please share it with people. And this book, probably you can get it in the library for faculty to understand what it is and later co-opt students into that kind of thinking. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and please go ahead, Q&A.
Sure, sir. I shall share. I shall share it with the people. Surely.
Okay. Yeah.
Sir, actually, we are running out of time. Even then, we'll have a few questions to be asked from
Yes.
the participants.
Yes.
So, participants, please,
Yes.
if you have any queries, please do ask fast. So, there is a question. What are the hindrances of effective teaching learning?
What are the hindrances? Yeah.
Of effective teaching.
Effective teaching learning. Yeah. See, actually, there is no one right way to teach, and there is no one right way to learn. Okay. So some teachers will use stories. Some people will be a little bit more strict. Some people could, use imagination and bring the idea of what's happening visually in front of you. Some people might bring it in terms of logic, they might bring it. So there is no one right way. So what I think the hindrance is, according to me, the hindrance is standardization. Standardization, not so much as an act, but our thinking that there's one way to do it. So I think I'll talk about solutions. The real hindrance is our sense of thinking that this is the right thing. So as a student or as a faculty, we should never think there is one way to do things. But it should not paralyze us. So at the end of the day, even if you have disagreements, we have to make a decision. We have to choose between A, B, or C. But 90% of the time, we should be discussing on what are the implications of A, B, and C in a patient manner, so that we are able to go behind the other person and say what he or she is trying to do. So the biggest hindrance is saying that, yeah, aisa hona chahiye. This is how it should be, is the biggest hindrance according to me. And many people say, if you say that, Professor Shankaran, you'll never make any decision. I said, absolutely wrong. Tell me all the things that I do. Everywhere we make a decision in time. But when we make a decision, we are not egoistic in thinking that we have made the right decision. We have a prayer on our lip and say, Are, this is all I can. We are trying to do the best way. We are doing in the most open, honest, ethical way. We have all the documentation available for making this decision. But given the circumstances, I had to take a call. I'll make the decision. And if it's really a crisis situation, you could jump in the front and take the bullet. Otherwise, stay behind, take consensus, and record it and so on and make a decision. So when people say that when you listen to several voices, you don't get paralyzed. In fact, your decision is faster and quicker and nicer, because you will be able to get lots and lots of ideas from people. So the biggest problem in this is standardization on not listening to each other. So we have to take feedback and all very seriously, and students have to give honest feedback. And we should never think that higher feedback means better. No. So I may be tough, but I may, at the end, you'll love me. The students would love me, but I may just get about 70 or 80%. So we have to look at things in a nuanced way. That's my answer.
Thank you, sir. The question was asked by Miss Amrita Radhakrishnan. There is one more question.
If you could, faculty or student?
Sir,
Faculty.
faculty.
Faculty, no? Yeah.
Faculty. And there is one more
Yeah, good.
question from
Yeah.
Roshmi. It was hello, sir. It was a great session. I wish to know your opinion on the new education system proposed by the central government in the recent months.
Oh, I have written extensively. In fact, let me tell you this. I'm absolutely neutral politically. I don't belong to anything. I'm an academic, and I believe a true academic is very, very lonely. Not lonely, alone actually. I wrote an article on lonely versus alone. One small article once. Um, why I'm saying this is I found NEP amazing because it is essentially talking about autonomy, and especially in free countries. Okay, autonomy of the intellect is very important. So I'm very fond of saying that in a society you have knowledge keepers, power keepers, money keepers, and service keepers. You know what I'm trying to say, right? The Indian old Indian system. It is by disposition, and there are some people who are disposed towards knowledge. I mean, one will miss a lunch for a book, for instance. I know people like that. Or people evening thing is so evening party is missed because you have a fantastic lecture by a Nobel Prize winner coming to a university or something. So what I'm trying to say is that NEP, if it is implemented properly, it will be fantastic. And I think that implementation requires now a buy-in by academics, if not buy-in, practice, and we have to give really serious feedback, and reverse mentoring has to happen. So I believe the politicians, and even very, very well-meaning politicians, and the power keepers, if I may say, of society, the bureaucracy, they need to be told what is happening. So I have written extensively about this, and I'll be happy to share. In fact, I have shared some of that, in my email at the bottom. Yeah. So NEP is a fantastic piece of document, but are we ready for it in terms of taking the bull by the horn, so to say, is something we'll have to see. For that, we'll have to really, really practice this thing and use it as a directive principle, because it is not implementation mantra. The specific, it only gives principles. So we have to translate these principles into rules by each of these institutions in their own way, and each institution should have their own mission statement, and mission should be taken very seriously. For instance, one university might say, we are going to take care of the local people and employment. Another person might say, no, we'll get people from outside, and we're going to have an international university in the midst of, the rural midst or something. And I don't want to talk about specific cases here. So we have to say what this mission, and some of it may be about, about getting students to be strict, another maybe about, getting them to do multidisciplinary. So depending upon how you want to do it, this mission is very important, and everybody has to come together on it. And we'll have to do some serious critical look at ourselves and our regulatory system, so that we don't wait for somebody else to tell us what to do. I can go on for a long time. There is something called Council for Higher Education Accreditation. Accreditation is not inspection. Accreditation in advanced countries, it's all self-regulation and self-order. We can talk about it at some other time. So it's a good piece, provided it's we are able to carry it.
Sir, one last question by RTK. How will be the classes taken after this COVID situation?
I think COVID is. I'm not a fortune teller, but I think it is already. I find attitude differences in people. The idea of power needs to be actually handled very carefully, and I feel it's not happening properly in our country. So we bow to, unauthorized, irresponsible power, if I may say. And I'm saying it as an academic very openly, without casting aspersions on any one person, because we have created the system. Now the academics have to redeem and say that, okay, this needs to be done. I need to work around this regulation. I will do this, but this particular piece of regulation is not exactly helping me. We have to come together and work at creating a a body of academics who are genuinely, you know, interested in students and their lives. And we can't sit anymore on power. Right now, academics copy, according to me. I mean, I know students are listening to this, but I think it's all power based and money based. We know it. Everybody knows it. Look at our films. You know, they show they are more representative of what is happening in society to a great extent, and not the discussion that go on in the class. There are reasons we gave more importance to professions in our country last 70 years, not really humanities education. There's a huge thrust on humanities, but we need to handle this very carefully, and we should be really respectful for all sections of people and all uh, ideologies. Genuinely, if you are, if you can follow some of the things that we talked here in terms of introspection and looking at perspectives and so on and so forth, we'll be able to reconcile. The beauty of education is we'll be able to criticize anything without pointing a finger to anybody, because at the end of the day, good research is saying, good writing, my research, any good writing is saying that I'm also part of this. We are all in the same, kind of conundrum. So let's get out of it. So I and you are not different. As Martin Buber says, I and thou, Mahatma Gandhi, that's what all great cultures are about. So we are able to represent this not with anger, but with, disappointment and hope for the future. Less disappointment, but hope for the future, because humans have something to do. We are ahead, and we can't be so very power and money oriented. So I think NAP is a very good piece of document.